But anyway, but the next step that I want to do is introduce our young piano restorer, Kestrel Currow, who will give you slightly more scholarly information about the piano, about its history, and about its unique features, and about all the work that he did to restore it for us. So I'm gonna, no further ado, turn this over to Kestrel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kestrel Currow, owner of Currow Piano Service. I've been in business since 2017, and I've been working on pianos since 2012 at Ithaca College, where I was learning and working in the music department, fixing practice rooms, that sort of thing. So before I start talking about the Vough Changeable Pitch piano, this is the patent. So I'm going to pass this around, and feel free to look at it while I'm talking. So to start, we have to start with tuning theory as to why do we tune pianos the way that we do? Why do we tune music the way that we do? So right now, the standard pitch for tuning is a 440 hertz, or cycles per second. This is a measurement. So how did we get to that measurement? So before we even thought about standardizing anything, we were just making instruments, and hopefully we were able to play with each other. Maybe we'd loosen the string a little bit to be more in tune, but nobody had a standard tuning. Everything was just kind of up in the air. It could be any pitch. What was really interesting is actually organs that were put in churches. The way you tune them, the most efficient way to tune them is to shorten the pipe a little bit. And you can only do that so many times before the pitch is way up there, and you can't sing with it anymore. You can't use it for anything. So you have to replace the pipes. And that's essentially what was happening, is that the pitches where we started from kept getting higher and higher, and we kept making better instruments, and we wanted more power and more brilliance. And in doing that, we needed to find, in doing that, we ended up raising the pitch so much that we couldn't handle it anymore, and people couldn't sing with it. So there was talk of forming a standard, but before I get into that, I want to talk about the first tuning fork. So the piano was invented by Cristofori in around the 1700s. The first tuning fork was invented by John Shore, who was an English trumpeter and lute player, and this was in 1711. So quite a while ago. And a musicologist later in 1880, Alexander J. Ellis, had measured the fork that he found that was the one that we could closest relate to John Shore's tuning fork at 419.9 hertz. So much lower than 440, but higher than some of the other notes that we came from. If you look at his research, he was measuring organs and other instruments way early, down to 370 hertz, and they went even higher up to 505 hertz, all with a standard A tuning in mind. So this was not working for concerts and for musicians, because as travel became easier, people wanted to play with each other, and their instruments were so completely different that there was no way they could play with each other and be even reasonably in tune. So a gentleman named Johann Schweitzer, in around 1834, he invented a device called the tonometer, not the one to measure eye pressure, but this is a very different device. It was pieces of wood with tuning forks attached to it. There was 56 tuning forks. They were tuned between 220 hertz and 440 hertz at 4 hertz intervals. And he could use this to measure the pitch of things. And also, if he wanted to create another tuning fork, he could use the device that he had to create one at a certain pitch. And being that he had decided between 220 and 440, he advocated 440 as our standard pitch in 1834 in a meeting in Stuttgart, Germany, which became known as Stuttgart pitch. But it was mostly ignored, and nothing happened. So we move on, and now we're in France, and France is becoming a industrious nation, very wealthy, very powerful. They also were leading in piano creation and other instrument development. So different manufacturers, musicians, even acousticians who wanted to use a standard pitch for measurement to do other science, they decided that they needed to do something. So a gentleman by the name of Claude Montal, who was a piano builder, a blind piano builder at that, mostly taught himself. He decided that he needed to be an activist and try to convince the government at the time in France, who it was Napoleon III, a nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. It was still somewhat of a dictatorship, but he ended up convincing them to form a commission. And in doing so, what he wrote on this to try and get some sort of a standard pitch so that instruments could be manufactured in a standard way and they could play with each other. He wrote, "It seems that standard pitch has varied considerably and risen since the last century, and these changes have contributed not a little to trouble good musical execution. So it seems to us that it would be in the greatest interest of the art if that a standard tuning reference, fixed and variable and based on the laws of nature, should be determined by a commission of the Institute composed of scientists and musicians, the former to develop a method of construction of an instrument as independent as possible of temperature variations, for example, a bell of crystal struck by a hammer of cork. The latter to decide the level of pitch to give it. A standard device deposited at the Institute or at the library of the Conservatory of Music would serve to tune the forks which were put into circulation. Theaters and public establishments adopting it, the wind instrument makers would modify their instruments and would construct instruments all at the same pitch. Thus, there would be no more difficulty in tuning many instruments of the orchestra together. Amateurs meeting to make music would find themselves always in agreement. Makers of pianos and harps would proportion the length of the strings according to the same pitch, so the instruments would break fewer strings and would be easier to tune and keep in tune. Voices, always singing at the same pitch, would sing with greater assurance and would never be troubled, as often happens, when they passed from one piano to another or to an orchestra tuned to a different pitch. Traveling artists would find the same pitch in every country as they find the same movement of the metronome. If variations were necessary under certain circumstances, one could make them in a regular manner by graduating the tuning forks, which would be raised or lowered successively by a certain number of vibrations above or below the standard. One can see how great an advantage there would be to music by undertaking this innovation. So by February 1st, 1859, the commission had reached a conclusion. Thus, the commission has the honor to propose to Your Excellency the institution of a uniform pitch for all the musical establishments of France, and to decide that the pitch standard for A be fixed at 870 vibrations per second or 435 hertz. So 435 hertz was actually the first attempt to implement a standard. So by 1860, around there, they pretty much set it in stone. They made it law. They actually had great difficulty in convincing the people of France to adopt this pitch because it was so expensive to replace all the instruments. The pitch that they were tuning to from the Paris Opera House at the time, 1858, was 448 hertz, which is much higher than 435 hertz. So it was impossible to just retune the instrument and leave it at that. You pretty much needed to replace the entire instrument, which leads us to about 1880s when the instruments were replaced for the most part, and the 435 pitch, not because of its pitch, but because of the idea of a standard, became more popular in Europe, and it moved to the United States. But we didn't use A435 for all the music, for the same reasons that we wanted the brilliance pitch and we wanted to keep raising the pitch in orchestra and instrumental music, was for the brilliance of the sound. So 435 was too low, too dull for this sort of sound. So the institutions had sort of decided to do a concert pitch as well. And this concert pitch composed of whatever pitch they decided to tune their concerts to, whatever the orchestra director, the opera house head decided would be their pitch. That's what they would tune to, and the musicians would tune to that. So now we have two pitches in circulation, one a fixed A435 and one some concert pitch up in the air, nobody knows, but we know it's higher than 435. So let's get into the Vough piano. So the Waterloo Organ Manufacturing Company was established in 1861 in Waterloo, New York. They made many small organs for households, but they did not last. In 1881, the factory was purchased by the partnership of Malcolm Love and Alexander C. Reed after a major fire destroyed the building. So they had taken over the company at that point. It was rebuilt and incorporated as the Waterloo Organ Company in 1888 with a shift in focus to pianos. The Malcolm Love and Alexander brands did well. In 1897, the factory burned down again and was replaced with an upgraded facility. In 1903, the Waterloo Organ Company was purchased by partners William Becker, Chauncey L. Becker, and William C. Vough. It was renamed the Vough Piano Company, with William Vough leading as the president. They continued to build Malcolm Love and Alexander pianos while taking the world by storm by introducing the Vough Changeable Pitch piano. It was immediately popular, and sales and production increased between 1903 and 1905. By 1904, the Vough Changeable Pitch piano could be found in the opera houses of Bradford, Pennsylvania, Mena, Arkansas, Clayton, New York, Erie, Pennsylvania, Huntington, West Virginia, Findlay, Ohio, Easton, Pennsylvania, and Geneva, New York. The Vough Company enjoyed success for a few years until it was purchased by the Wegman Piano Company in 1913. William C. Vough submitted his invention to the United States Patent Office on September 7, 1899. It was later granted on January 9, 1900, and given the patent number US 640838A. The patent describes the modification to the upright piano action to allow for changing of the pitch center of the instrument between international pitch A435 and concert pitch. If the piano in international pitch produces A435, then the piano in concert pitch would be exactly one semitone above, equal to about A461 hertz, when using equal temperament. Vough describes why he chose to invent this device. It is well known that it is desirable to readily raise or lower the pitch of a piano, as for instance, to change the same from standard to concert pitch and vice versa. My piano action is of such construction that this object may be readily effected without material addition to the cost of the action, injury to the piano, or impairment of its operation. It was clear to Mr. Vough that there was a need for this invention in the musical world, and he set out to make it a reality. By buying the factory with help from his partners, he was able to realize his idea completely and introduce it to the world. The following is an excerpt from a propaganda document from the Vough Company about the changeable pitch piano as published on page 16 of the Music Trade Review in 1906. Why is the changeable pitch piano desirable? Because fast music must have the high notes of concert pitch for the best rendering. And on the other hand, slow music requires the low sympathetic tones of international pitch. For persons who appreciate music, no other argument is necessary. In the theater, the Vough can be used in concert pitch with the orchestra, and by simply moving the knob can be changed in an instant to international for accompaniment to the voice. This decided advantage has placed the Vough into many a theater during the past 3 years. For all places where concert pitch is desired, the Vough has a unique advantage. For in other pianos, there is from 3 to 4 tons more strain on the back and strings of the piano in concert pitch than in international. But in the Vough, the strain is always the same, the lesser strain of international pitch. So what this means in terms of construction of a piano is strings have a breaking point, and 70% of that breaking point creates the best sound that you can get from that string. So when a piano is designed, it's measured a certain length and a certain thickness and a certain tension of the string, as well as considering the string's material itself. And it's designed so that all of the strings in the piano are at about 70%, so it has the best tone. Now, if we want to go 26 hertz up from 435 to 461, then we end up with much tighter strings, up to 90%, 95, 100% to breaking point. So we may actually break the strings and also very much thin out the sound of the piano. If we want to go the other way, we loosen the strings, and the hammers and the dampers, they don't dampen the strings, they don't work as well, the strings are floppy, the tone is dull. So if we wanted to build a piano at 435 and try to pull it up, we might break stuff. So he made this so that wouldn't happen. So now we can switch between 435 and 461 without changing any tension on the strings. All we do is essentially move the hammers up one note, which is not exactly what's happening, but I'll show you on the video. So this invention, as much as it's a transposing piano, is not really transposing in the sense that, oh, I can't play in C, I'm going to transpose it so it's easier to play in a different key. It was built for A435 and concert pitch, which makes it a very unique instrument, considering there's only about 5,000 of these ever made, and this is probably one of the last ones in existence. It's pretty amazing that it's still here, and I got it to work. In terms of the Vaugh's argument for why higher pitches sound better for faster, brighter music, and why lower pitches are better for singing, from what I've been able to come up with for myself, is the average human hearing range is between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. But from my own experience and talking with other technicians and other people, audiologists, its average is more like stopping point is around 11,000, 15,000 hertz. And then those with hearing loss can't even hear beyond 4,000 hertz. So if we think about when we play low notes on the piano, well, I guess I got to tell you about the harmonic series too. So when you play a note on the piano, you get the fundamental, and you get an octave up, and you get a fifth above that, and a fourth above that. And these are all sounding from that same pitch. It's just the physics of how a string works. And it goes in a sort of logarithmic function. So here's the start pitch, and we go up, and it kind of flattens off. So if we're listening to low notes, we're hearing this low down. It's all within our hearing range. It sounds rich. In fact, if you try to play too many chords too low down, it starts sounding muddy because you get so much harmonics. But if you're up in the upper register, you don't hear as many of the harmonics, so you hear the fundamental a lot more clear, making it understandable that that would be a more brilliant, clear, piercing tone if you can't hear all the other harmonics. So I believe that's what he's saying when he says the more mellow sound of low pitch as opposed to the higher, brighter sound of high pitch. It has to do with human hearing. Which I don't know if they described it like that. They sort of have a mystical idea of if it's fast and it's orchestral, it needs to be higher in pitch. Explain what? Yeah, eventually. Getting there. So now that you understand sort of the purpose of why this piano is invented, hopefully you can understand why a musician might want to get rid of it in the 1930s, because around the end of the 1930s, 440 was standardized. And when 440 was standardized, no other pitches before it had any standing whatsoever. It was thrown out. So a piano like this essentially became obsolete in 1936, 1939. So if a musician, especially a vocalist, would want to have a piano that is standard to what the music industry says we should do, then this piano is not that piano. Unless she wanted to spend the money to have it completely redesigned and restrung, which I don't think she did. So she decided to give it to the Crawford house, and not being professional musicians and also not really being forced to do a 440, they could still get a lot out of this piano. So let me just show you on the TV here a little bit about the inside of the piano and how the action works.
Mike, if you're stuck here, do you use it?
It doesn't need, actually, I'll talk over it. So this is the lever. It goes back. I'll show it. So here's the lever attaching to the action. It goes back behind the keys and attaches to the action there. These two prongs that come up and touch that lever. So if we move the lever, it'll swivel. It'll push that arm in and out, and it'll swivel to the bottom of the piano, the bottom of the action here, like this. The bottom will swivel when the lever is pushed forward and back. So if you can see, this bottom part where it connects to the keys here, these swivel forward and back. So that's how it changes pitch. So this piano actually has 89 hammers, but 88 keys. So when you switch it, it moves everything up to the next. So now we'll look at how it lines up. So we have the key, which goes back. And we can see at the end of the key, there's a screw that meets up with this wooden piece, which goes up and pushes on the hammer and the rest of it, and then the hammer hits the string. But what's interesting is it has this extra arm that comes out and goes to the note next to it. So when we swivel the action, the key plays the arm next to it and not the arm in front of it. You can see that. So it's not especially complex, but it solves the problem and it's relatively easy to implement. Now I'll show you a few photos.
You, and then slideshow. Then you can just, yeah.
So this was the keyboard before I did anything to it.
We needed to do some work. Yeah.
This is broken plastic. It did not have ivory. So at some point, somebody put plastic on it. This piano, probably around 1906, 1907, when it was first made. And I know they didn't use plastic then. So at some point, somebody took off the ivory and put plastic. Yeah. So as you can see at the beginning, there's no lever. Keys are all broken. After putting on the new keys, I made sure they were nice and level, straight. Before and after. And what's really interesting about this piano is it has these 4 keys because of the change pitch mechanism. There are no other pianos that I've seen like this, and I've seen many, many pianos, but I've never seen this fourth before. And the only reason I could think is because of the changeable pitch mechanism. There's only two, but that's a very interesting feature of this piano as well. So when I got it, it was quite dirty and old felt, eaten away by bugs and such, and I was able to replace it. So if you see this bar here that runs across here, that's actually somewhat of the locking mechanism for the changeable pitch. So when you push the lever, the bar flips under the keys. It kind of thumps and makes a lock. So the lever's not just flopping back and forth, and then you pull it forward and it flops back to you, and it locks. So this is what it says inside the piano. In tuning the Vough Changeable Pitch piano, be sure that the action is thrown over to international or low pitch. That's how I was able to discover A435 on this piano, because it told me. And tune to the international pitch tuning fork. And then the rest deals with adjusting the action, but it says the same thing. To adjust it, you have to put it in low pitch, adjust something, put it in high pitch, adjust that other thing. So that's what this piano is. It's a very interesting piano. So now I will play it for you a little bit. Yeah. To let you hear what's going on with this piano. It's in low pitch right now. I'm playing a C major chord. If I put it in the high pitch and I play a C major chord, this is what I get. Essentially a semitone up. So now I'm playing C sharp. C sharp. Say A440. There's a difference in the pitches. A435. Here's A461. Does anyone here claim to have perfect pitch? So if you look away from this piano, look away. What note is it?
Sounds sort of like that.
T. To play again.
I would say A flat, but now I'm thinking it's G.
It is a G. Pitch is a phenomenon of A440 and equal temperament. If you switch the pitch center, perfect pitch doesn't matter anymore. No offense. Play some Debussy for you at a low pitch. Let's do high pitch instead. In your opinion, that instrumental, which did it sound better? I pitch low. All right, low pitch. I like high pitch. Because I'm supposed to. That's it for me. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you learned